I have newfound respect for politicians.
Is there an illusion about power that collapsed for you?
If I had to do everything as per what people thought, I wouldn't get much done. Such a polarized society. Whose side are you on? Accept that? Do I appreciate that? No, I don't. Being organically connected to the voter is something that is absolutely invaluable.
Somehow
I don't
what
think that
was there?
I don't think they've learnt all the lessons they should have. Did they come in for the love of journalism? No, they didn't.
So much of that decision making appears to be not driven by politicians.
They tend to depend a lot on the bureaucracy.
To another episode of Context with Asiya Riaz. I'm very fortunate today to be talking to one of my favorite journalists, Fahd Husain. Fahd Husain literally needs no introduction. He's a very well-known journalist, he's an analyst, he's a commentator, he writes really well and has a brief stint with the government. And I think that's something that I'm really interested in talking to you about, Fahd.
Sure.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I know how much is on your plate, in terms of starting a new channel and all that you do otherwise,
Correct.
Writing and everything. I've been very intrigued by when you chose to be part of government. And so tell me how you chose, because I know we've had cases in which journalists have sort of gone in government briefly and kind of come out. Why did you choose to join the government, and what did that teach you?
It was a well-considered decision, and I took that decision in 2022 after spending almost 3 decades in journalism. So one of my reasons was that I've come a long way in terms of my profession, and I've done quite a bit in those 3 decades. Both in terms of newspapers, television, being behind the camera, the editor, writer, talk show. So, done a bunch of stuff. And when this opportunity came along, I thought, well, why not? Why not be on the other side of the table? Now, did I know that in Pakistan people look at this very differently? Of course I did. I was not the first one to do so,
Yeah.
and most likely I'm not the last one.
Absolutely.
But, in many mature democracies, this is a routine. A lot of people do it. A lot of journalists do it in the US, in other places. So it's, in the Pakistani context, it's taken differently because we are such a polarized society. And, even when it comes to journalists, now the thing is, okay, whose side are you on? And I've always found that very strange. Now, I knew that this would mean that if I made this decision, a lot of people will say, well, you've chosen sides.
Yeah.
Or
you're politically tainted.
Or you're politically tainted, which is the norm in Pakistan. But, Asiya, if I had to do everything as per what people thought, I wouldn't get much done. So I had my logic, I had my rationale, I thought hard about it. And then I decided to do it and to see how it goes and how I can benefit and how I can contribute. So yeah, it was a well thought out decision, and I've taken a lot out of it.
What was the yearning? Was it the curiosity of, while you're reporting on what happens in the government, you'd like to be on the other side to, that journalistic curiosity to see how decisions are made? Or it was just simply like a, career step, a different side? Or?
No, I think the curiosity was absolutely there because, if you've been doing something for as long as I have, and I started my career in 1991 as a journalist, from the bottom as a lowly sub-editor in those days. So, I've covered a lot of events, but in fact, almost all of the events that have happened in Pakistani politics since then, you will recall...
All the catalyst events in the past.
Yeah, and especially in the 90s, we call them the turbulent 90s where governments were being thrown out and brought back in. So I was a reporter then. So I've been covering politics since then. So clearly, after 3 decades, you do have the urge to to say, well, how about trying to be on the other side and figure out how decisions are made, as you said. What is the thinking there? And what is the gap between what is discussed in behind closed doors and what is then presented to us or people like me for the last 30 odd years. So absolutely, I think it was one of the key reasons for my decision, which by the way turned out very interesting. And of course then the other thing was, okay, I became a journalist because, I like to contribute to public discourse, even at that very young age when I started journalism. And being on the other side is also taking on a public role. So my reasons were very clear, despite knowing that in the Pakistani context, they would be taken in a different way. But then, as I said earlier, I wouldn't want to.
No, look, to be honest, I'm very intrigued by that, not from a negative perspective, completely from a perspective of somebody who's learned on the other side. And I think before I get to that, I'd like to ask you, is there an illusion about power that collapsed for you? What was the first one when you sat on the other side?
Collapsed in the sense of what you think of what power is, and then you actually go
No,
and see
I mean, two sides are actually different, or you think they're not. So there was no illusion that collapsed. So it was just as
illusion
envisioned it to be.
in the sense that, when you're covering politics very closely, you have a fair idea of how things go. When you are on the other side of the table, then you get to see it firsthand. Was there a huge difference between what I thought and what I saw? Probably not. Not huge, but was there significant difference? Yes. What was that difference? I think that difference was in terms of the way that decisions are made, and the logic and rationale that is given for those decisions, the kind of input that comes into those decisions, whether it is coming from the political side, the bureaucracy, public opinion, etc., etc. And then finally, how Pakistani politics has become a zero-sum game, and why it has become so, and why it is unlikely to not reverse itself. So some of these things were, of course, very important for me. And the final thing was, of course, I got a lot of international exposure, which was something that was
I'll ask you.
thing.
I'll ask you about that, because some of those were very interesting times that you lived through. But so and this was a brief stint. You were in office for but less than a year, right?
It was about 11 months.
And so has that made you, as a journalist, as somebody who's come back to the practicing side, more cynical about how decisions are made, or more empathetic to how decision making is done?
I don't think I've become cynical. I'm not cynical.
Are you more understanding of the process?
I'm not cynical as a person. Generally, I'm generally very positive, even in the worst of situations. Have I become more understanding? Maybe a little bit more so. I understand why now people do what they do. Do I accept that? Do I appreciate that? No, I don't. But I have a better perspective on why people get to do
the reason
those
why
things.
I'm asking that is because, the amount of work we've done, 2 decades plus in PILDAT, in working with Parliament, with provincial assemblies. And we've looked at so many other countries' models of public representation, talked to those people, and I think that perspective of dealing with elected representatives has certainly made the organization far more empathetic towards the position that they're in. I mean, most of the time they're making the decisions that they're doing because they're representing their constituents, and they're doing exactly what their constituents want them to do. It's not the other way around. That's really what I was asking about. Has that made you kind of understand where they're coming
in that
from
sense,
much more?
Yes, I would agree with you. I've looked at politicians very closely. Some of the things that I've seen clearly are not something which would make one very happy. But I have newfound respect for politicians. I think generally in Pakistan, we have a cynical attitude towards them. We tend to run them down very easily. But having been up close and personal with them, I now realize more than before that having somebody in a position of decision making, who has a finger on the pulse of the people is very important, because decisions have to connect with people. Decisions made by people who are sitting in the ivory towers and who, have only an indirect appreciation of what the public opinion is, of what people are feeling, and what the impact of those decisions would be on those people. I think they are not in as good a position as a politician is. So absolutely, I really appreciate the fact that we have politicians. There are 10 million things that we can criticize them for, but one of their most redeeming features, which essentially is the soul of what they do, is knowing what the people are thinking, what the people want. So being organically connected to the voter is something that is absolutely invaluable.
So much of that decision making appears to be not driven by politicians or public representatives or those who have a hand on the pulse of the people. So much of it is done by military and civil bureaucracy, or led by that.
Yeah.
So what do you say about that? So you're saying that only when politicians are leading that there's better decision making, but we have so little of that, or is my perception wrong?
No, I think it's a combination. It's a combination of having the sense of the public, then also having a sense of the nature and magnitude of the problem, and then having the ability or the capability to craft the right kind of approach and then have it implemented. So there are different stages in governance. I think politicians generally, I don't want to generalize because obviously there are good and bad people everywhere. But I think I've talked about the strength of the politician. I think the weakness of the politician is that when it comes to governance and the actual nitty-gritty of policy making and policy implementations, they tend to depend a lot on the bureaucracy, because they don't have the exposure.
Isn't that how it's supposed to be?
Yes, but it's supposed to be the bureaucracy implementing the vision of the political class. The politician, that assumption is based on the fact that the politician has a very clear vision. I think there is a difference between knowing what the people want and having a vision, because oftentimes a vision can be something which is rooted in your own belief, and sometimes that belief might go against what people think. So it's a tricky thing. It's a tightrope walking. In our case, because the politicians have never had the kind of absolute decision-making power that, for example, their counterparts would have in more mature democracies. So I think they tend to outsource a lot of things to the civil and military bureaucracy. As a result of which, I think we get a combination where the bureaucracy feels more empowered, and the politicians are happy, doling out or focusing on elements of governance which connect directly to their own politics.
Yeah, but you'd think that, now we have a system, at least you said that, since the 1990s, in which these political parties have time and again been in power, been part of decision making, have been thrown out, ushered out, eased out, whichever model you look at, one way or the other, have learnt their lessons. But still, that vision in which you understand that, okay, you made a mistake this time and now you're not going to do that, you feel that somehow was there?
I don't think they've learnt all the lessons they should have. We have two kinds of political parties: the so-called old ones who've been there since the last couple of decades, and then we have the new one.
But the new one consists of all the old ones, and so they've been, at least barring a few people, have been part of the power.
But the fact is that in these parties, decision making is done by
the leader.
One or two people.
Yeah.
So even if we talk of PTI and we talk of PTI's
one essentially,
governance, it is essentially that. Maybe in the other parties there is one or two. But the fact is that at least I can tell you from the 90s. So the kind of evolution that should have happened in the last 30, 40 years within our political structure or politicians themselves hasn't happened. And that was one of the key reasons why Imran Khan rose so swiftly as he did. There were, of course, other reasons, and the support from the military and all that. But the organic support that Imran Khan draws is primarily rooted in the fact that the other parties haven't really been able to evolve to a level where they should have been. Now, if you talk to them, they have a pet answer where we haven't been allowed to do so. Fair enough, it's a chicken and egg story. But again, yes, I would not buy that. A lot of things that people who have been in positions of power since the last 3 decades, are they now taking decisions that one would expect from people who have so much experience? No, they're not. Why are we not seeing fundamental radical reform? Why are we not seeing things change as swiftly as they can? Why have we not seen, the fundamentals of governance that connect directly to the people? Whether it is policing, whether it is local governments, whether it is health, all these service-oriented aspects. The basic life of a common Pakistani hasn't changed, at least since I have started journalism. Or if it has changed marginally. It hasn't changed radically. So the question is...
Why, in fact, I think I should ask you, why do you think that happened? That interplay of various power centers when decisions
because I think,
made. How did you see that? What's the culprit?
The basic form of governance and people who are part of that governance system or architecture or domain, whatever you call it, are the same. Not in terms of personalities. Some personalities are the same, but the systems are the same, even in terms of your military and civil bureaucracy. So, and some people, it's very fashionable to use the term elite capture. But the fact, it's been used to death also.
Yeah.
But there is an element of truth to that. I don't think that explains in totality our problems, but I think there is absolutely an element that connects to the larger problem. Now, let me bring in another factor: media. Now, media became hugely influential in the last couple of decades, especially after the television came. Has media, for example, when I started in 1991, there was no television. So for 10 years we were doing newspapers, and there were a few newspapers, and they had their own influence, and the owners had a seat at the high table, etc., etc. But since television came, we had this, a large number of new entrants coming into the industry. Did they come in for the love of journalism? No, they didn't. They came in because they thought, well, this is the shortcut to influence and power and a seat on the high table. One of the things that has happened is, now, and when I look back, for example, is that let's say from 2002, when the first channel opened in Pakistan, till 2025, has media improved as much as it should have, or has it actually degenerated? Now, there are a number of reasons for the answer that I will give you, but in my considered opinion, it is nowhere even close to where it should have been. In 2002, 2003, when I looked ahead and when I thought of the next 20 years, I thought, I'd just come fresh from doing my master's in America, so I thought, wow, in 20 years, we are going to be one of the top media markets in at least in the region, definitely, because we are an English-speaking country otherwise, and also we have a culture of media freedom. We're not there. So the reason why I mentioned that is that
you're
media...
You're saying it's digressed and it's regressed.
It has regressed in many ways.
Because, I mean, when we started with what is now legacy media, but at that time was the new media, the electronic media, we kind of let go of so many things which were going on in front of us because we thought they're in the trainee mode. So from the trainee mode, it has completely regressed now? What are you saying?
No, what I'm saying is that I'm connecting it to the original point that we were talking about. Why have things improved? Not
governance,
improved. And the reason why I'm talking about the media is that I'm trying to place it as another example of a new sector with a new leadership, media leadership, whether it is in front of the camera or management or owner, who became part of this elite culture. So media allowed a shortcut to influence and power and a route to gate crash the elite club.
So you were telling me about the learning that you had, which was overseas, the places that you visited. If you can just give me some of the most interesting aspects that you saw of our
So-
foreign policy being played in foreign capitals. You were part of how many foreign visits with
Quite
the
a few
Prime
actually.
Minister?
Quite a few actually.
Which stands out?
I think I really learned a lot in meetings with, for example, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Very informative meeting for me personally.
Can I stop you here and ask you that was something as recent as the defense spec that we've signed, has that been in play for as long as when you were there?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I can take a wild guess, but I wouldn't know. I have no information for
But
that.
now tell me, what impressed you about that conversation?
I think again, Saudi Arabia has a completely different system, and all this conversation that we're having doesn't connect to how they govern themselves. But my own individual perception of the Crown Prince was somebody who was absolutely on the go. Now, we've all heard stories about how he governs and how he runs the system,
Yeah.
but seeing him, right in front of you and doing what he does, engaging with our side, making decisions, knowing, having facts on his fingertips, etc., etc. So generally, he seemed like less like a leader and more like a chief executive. So very very
The
impressive.
dynamism that people talk about
Yeah,
who've
you could see
interacted
that.
with
I
him.
mean, I didn't spend hours and hours, but whatever little time that I had in that meeting, I could tell why he has been able to do what he has been able to do, because the kind of personality he has, the kind of homework he does, which was apparent from
And a
from
very
the
young
conversation.
cabinet, very sharp cabinet
Absolutely.
under him, yeah.
So yeah, that was very impressive. I think that was probably the only person or the person who impressed me the most.
I understand that Saudi Arabia, for a large part of our, I think, previous decade now, has been asking Pakistan to not come to us for help, but come to us for investment. Was that an agenda that you saw unfold in front of you?
So yeah, the mutual investment one is absolutely the main focus. At our end, traditionally, I've spoken to a lot of people about why we've not succeeded in having more investment from the Saudis. From our end, people do acknowledge that we haven't really followed up as
Picked
much
up
as
the pace.
we should
I know.
have.
I spend my time in Riyadh as well, and I've talked to people close to government over
And you're
there.
hearing the same thing.
I'm hearing the same thing from Saudis. They say that many MOUs that they sign, on which so much of the onus of responsibility is on Pakistani side, things are so slow.
Yeah.
Sometimes even to be able to sort of get them to sign an MOU, the Saudi side has to write an MOU, which is a little, one feels, oh God, we should have been better about that. But that's what I'm hearing, yeah.
And I think that points to two things. A, decision making which does not follow up, and B, serious lack of capacity. We have serious capacity issues within the government structure. And the
So what was more difficult, the messaging at home or messaging abroad? Because I'm sure you were dealing with both.
No, I think the messaging home was very, very difficult, because the way that the vote of no confidence had happened, how Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf then responded to it, and then the economy, going to the edge of default, increasing the prices of petrol, then inflation going through the roof. So those were, I'm talking summer of 22. These were very difficult times for the government at home. Abroad, I think the floods were a major issue. They were devastating, and then Pakistan had to do fundraising from the international community, which worked out rather well actually. So and then of course there were relations with. There were many visits to Turkey and to Saudi Arabia, to China, and the US. The relationship with the US, of course, was as you remember that during the Biden administration, there was hardly any contact between the US president and whether it was the PTI government or later on the PDM government. So things were different that way. But with China and with Turkey and with the Gulf, I think things were okay.
Tell me on the domestic messaging, which you identified as far more complex at the time, because PTI was on a rampage, so to speak, hitting everyone and everything with tirades, with attacks and everything, be that your military leadership at the time or US for that matter, for meddling into it. When you were developing that messaging in dealing with it in real time, were you, because there's a civil side of communication expertise and then there's a military side which is done by ISPR. Was there any coordination in what message is going to get out? Were you dealing with that quite a bit?
I think it's a given that there is now a lot of coordination between the military side and the civilian side, and that coordination
that's consistent with that?
It's been institutionalized for many years. I will say at least since the PTI government came in, it's been institutional. Before that, of course, when the PMLN government was there, it was slightly less so because there was a more of a I wouldn't say confrontational, but adversarial sort of a relationship between the then Prime Minister and the military leadership, so things were a little different. But since the PTI government came in, I think it's been a fairly institutionalized system now. That continues till today.
If it does continue, and I'm kind of digressing from when you were in power to today, who was consulting whom in the scenario in which the DGISPR's latest press conference saying what he said about mental health of jailed Imran Khan and all? I mean, isn't that a message which could have come from the civilians and could have been perhaps more palatable?
I mean, I think it depends. There's so many views on this particular thing if you want to focus on the latest press conference. And you'll find people
you
arguing
don't
both
think it's
ways.
counterproductive?
No, I don't think so. I think
gloves are off, then who else?
Because again, you see, you can't see anything in isolation. Everything is connected to what we ultimately see happening, and the relationship between, for example, now we're talking about the PTI and the establishment. That relationship has had a very bitter history of the last couple of years, and it continues to do so. So, in an ideal situation,
would you not define this as a watershed? This particular press conference?
Watershed in what sense?
Like, we've not really heard language like this. We've seen pretty bad language on both sides before.
Watershed is a strong word, but I would say that yes, it actually does indicate a very hardening of a position which prior to this press conference, one could have thought that perhaps there is some space for engagement, perhaps there could be some outreach. But I think after this, to me, it looks increasingly difficult now. To me, the larger question is, why did this press conference happen? What led to it? And again, as I say that, this is not very difficult to understand.
No, it's not. I mean, of course, the first stone was thrown by the other side, so that part's clear. That tweet wasn't really the most diplomatic or easiest of languages used, and you can't do that.
But again, it's not just one tweet.
Yeah,
it's a series of things which have been building up and up, and that's fine.
Yeah, were we under any illusion that things were even improving between the two sides?
No,
I don't think there was anyone thinking that there's any approach.
But there's always hope on both sides. There's always hope, which makes sense, because the PTI is a popular party, and you can't have that party completely shut out of the system in an ideal situation, and you can't wish away the establishment, whatever your political ideology is. So the more realistic option is, how do we move on from here?
Can you wish away the PTI?
No, you can't. There's no way.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying that, ultimately there has to be some sort of a solution to this. That solution is not visible at all at this stage. Does that mean that everybody's given up hope? No. I think there is still some effort happening, both within the PTI and perhaps quietly on the other side also. And I think we know that some people are doing so openly. Some erstwhile PTI people like Fawad Chaudhry and Imran Ismail who are actively doing it. So ultimately, I think we will have to reach a stage where something will have to give. but it's very hard to say what that would be and when that would happen.
Fahd, you said that part of the exposure that you had to close decision making on the international front, you mentioned China as well, and you mentioned Saudi Arabia. Now, there's with the kind of model of governance that we've had for so long, it's military, more and more entrenched into decision making, sort of being the elder brother leading the way and civilians kind of following. At least that's the impression that's outside, and you can speak to that because you were part of that. There's almost like a renewed debate in the society that that used to be an earlier political science debate, democracy versus development, whether democracy is going to lead you to good governance or whether just development without democracy can get you there as well. And earlier also the model or the argument was used that look at China and look at these countries in the Gulf, look at Saudi, look at where democracy of course is not there, but development and the fruits of development and good governance to people are there. There's also this concern in Pakistan, the more we inch towards good relationship with countries that are not democracies, and with the kind of historical system of governance that we have, that we may be very tempted to go towards a more authoritarian model where development would matter more than democracy. Do you think that is the leading thinking in Pakistan, or and the second question is whether you think that's a possibility?
So we've seen this up and down cycle between authoritarianism and democracy in Pakistan. So it's not something which is new for us and not something which is happening right now. Of course, every era has its own dynamics, and at this particular time, the difference I think is that there is a greater strength of argument for authoritarianism in the world, even in democratic setups. Look at Donald Trump.
So?
Look at Donald Trump.
There's populism, but this is democratically elected populists.
Again,
in India, in US,
what I'm saying is that
Europe and all,
strong men, strong systems, authoritarianism.
But completely,
it is
completely
something
elected
absolutely
by power of
but
people.
there is a greater level of tolerance for people who are not your conventional liberal Democrats. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Then, at a time when the unipolar moment is over, when the world is dividing into camps, and where there are only three major powers now left, which is the US, China, and to a lesser extent Russia. In this kind of a time, success stories breed their own logic. So now one hears more arguments about, oh, look at China, look at Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. Does that apply to Pakistan? I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because, we live in a certain system.
There's no romanticism that you've seen in power circles with that?
No, with power circles, I don't know. If you look at, what do you call power circles? The elected leadership or
authoritarian sort of...
That's always been there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had so many military rounds. But can it happen in Pakistan? I don't think so. Because I think, look, we follow the 1973 constitution. However flawed it might be. But that is the only consensus document we have. Now, if Pakistan has to change course and go towards a different kind of system, it will need to have a certain consensus for it. I cannot see, and I don't want to see, somebody imposing a certain kind of system on Pakistan. It hasn't worked before, and it's not going to work again. Does that mean that the present system cannot be improved? Of course not. It must be improved, which is why I think, in my opinion, it is healthy to have a debate on having smaller provinces. It is healthy to have a debate about relooking at the National Finance Commission, etc., etc. As long as there is a debate and it is done legally, why not? But this idea of somebody coming and saying, okay, from tomorrow onwards, this is how Pakistan is going to be, it hasn't worked before, and I don't think it's going to work again.
It's one thing that you think that we're no closer to being in that mode, but are you confident or are you skeptical that democracy will actually deliver development to Pakistan?
I think democracy will deliver, and I say that, of course, as somebody who has absolute hope in the system. But does this current system does
Give
it
you
need to
any
be improved?
confidence? Yeah.
Does it needs to be improved? Things need to change, but they need to change through the system. For example, we know that this current system has resisted local governments. Absolutely. Why? That has to change. That doesn't mean democracy has to be thrown out. It just means that this current shape of democracy has to improve to become a better version of itself.
Yeah, but Fahd, again, I'm talking to somebody who's seen things inside out, not just by being in power, but otherwise as well. You've seen that in more cases than not, conversations about change, change like you just said, more provinces, is not really driven by political parties. Now, we could have had this entire debate about local governments, and having effective local governments essentially takes away the question of having more provinces, because if you have better governance at the local level, you might not really need
Yes
to
and
change,
no, but okay.
change power structures because it's a very costly thing to have more provinces, more chief ministers, more secretariats, etc., and local government can do that for you. But even the debate about improving things is not really originating from within the political circles. It's not originating
Agreed.
from the parliament.
See, if the traditional parties were in favor of local governments, we would have had them. The fact that we don't have them means that the local government is just one example that we're talking about, which is a glaring governance failure. Now, what happens? So, if they're not interested, does that mean that that's the end of the story? No. Somebody or some place or some institution has to push for it. Now, in our context, that institution has been the judiciary, Supreme Court has pushed for it, and now we know that the establishment is pushing for it. So, at the end of the day, if
establishment is not pushing for local government, it's pushing for more provinces.
Well, let's see. All I'm saying is that there are a number of things that need to improve for this present system to deliver. You asked me whether you think that democracy can deliver, and my opinion is yes, it can, but it needs to improve itself. Now, if the existing political
parties... This is the view
parties,
of somebody who's in love with democracy and doesn't want to see it any other way, or this is your pragmatic view?
No, my pragmatic...
That democracy will deliver, not that it must deliver.
No, my absolute pragmatic view is that we don't have any other option. But we also don't have the option of keeping things the way they are. We've seen that in the last 30 years. So
Status
things
quo
have to
isn't
move.
Helping. Yeah.
Now, where does that push come from? My argument is that, if in this particular context, the push comes from the judiciary or it comes from the establishment, but it is pushed through the democratic system, then it is good. And there are some things on which I think every Pakistani would agree. For example, reforming the police system, right? Nobody would say, don't reform it. It has not been reformed. It's a provincial subject. Or, improving the service-oriented performance of provincial governments in terms of health and schooling and education. All of the things are integral to Pakistan, evolving out of being a third world country. If it hasn't happened for the last 30 years with the same kind of people in power, then clearly there's a problem. Now there's a counter argument.
Yeah, but how do we do that?
But there's a counter argument. Well, the last 30, 35 years, it's not just the politicians who've been in power. The military ruled for so many years, openly and then from behind the scenes. That is true. So, the fact is that it is very difficult, very easy to blame A or B. The fact is that, A and B both get blamed. But we need to move beyond the blame game. What do we do? And that is why I'm saying that, if Pakistan has to really improve as a country, not just militarily, which we have, but also economically and socially and educationally and so many other ways, we need to fix this system. And this system is not going to fix itself. As long as the system is being pushed to fix itself, it has to change in a way that does not break the system down. It needs to improve, which is why this argument that a non-democratic authoritarian system can suddenly come and change things. No, it can't. If it could, it would have done so.
No, but this is
previously.
where your favorite or not so favorite term of, elite sort of, comes in, that, they're the ones who are completely in power, and more people join that to make it the elite capture that we keep talking about. With so many people who have a stake in making the status quo continue, who would actually bring the change? I'm sure you've read that article of Atif Mia that recently came, which is talking about what all Pakistan needs to change to just improve the per capita income. It's all good on what you have in terms of agenda for reform, but it doesn't really tell you how to get there. So how will we get there in today's atmosphere?
See, we have.
Who's driving the change?
I think we have a system in place, which is, officially a hybrid system.
Yes.
Our defense minister said so openly, so we can now quote him, like good journalists.
One government after the other,
Yeah.
being on the same page, which I think is absolutely constitutionally right. Both have to be on the same page.
Absolutely.
To the
Now,
hybrid system.
So clearly, is this the pure, absolute, undiluted, unvarnished liberal democracy that is envisioned in
I don't
in
think we
history?
ever
Well,
were a liberal
we've
democracy.
never been there. Liberal, not economically, and certainly not culturally also. So who drives the change? We have a system in which power is shared by the civilian side, and the military and civil bureaucracy have their very important role, and then of course there's the judiciary, and then there's the opposition, and lately the media also, but not so much so anymore, I think. In that sense, the players continue to change. If you go to the PTI,
Or remain the same.
Or remain the same. PTI was in power. The main system was still the same, etc., etc. My point is that we can't outsource governance to a third country. These are the people, these are the institutions. They have to make the change that we are looking at. People say, well, if we had absolutely clean elections, and then that government would make the change. Fact is, that's good thinking, but ultimately, in a hybrid system, the hybrid players are all involved.
You'd think that
we don't have any outsider.
more people joining the power would actually change things, but it hasn't really.
More people in the sense of what, that the opposition.
I mean, more people have a stake in continuing the system. Yeah, it's not just a civilian elected political government which is running the show for so many years now, for so many decades now. Military is also running the show in so many decades now. So one would think that would have changed something. Like, we've seen in other countries where dictatorships have come in, have made fundamental changes to a country's development situation, and then have actually left. We've not seen that changing. We actually see things.
Despite the fact that we've had dictators.
Yeah.
So, if it were our first time for us, there could be an argument made that, what if a dictator comes and shuffles things around and, knocks some heads together and gets those decisions done which we need. But we have seen that, and dictators come through only one institution. They don't come from any other way. So what has fundamentally changed? So in my opinion, I think that's a romantic thinking, but ultimately, if governance was such a shortcut thing, then perhaps more countries would have succeeded. We live in a country where there's a messy system because it's a federation. It's not a unitary state, and we have to take everybody along. We've seen what happened in our history when some people were not taken along. So we can't repeat that. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes people from all different institutions to do their part. But as long as the system continues to improve itself, I think there is logic, and there is some hope that things will improve. That's the only way. There is no other way.
Fahd, so now, we're of course, our view, and I'm saying that more in terms of age than anything else, maybe jaded. We've seen the process continue. We've seen cyclical issues taking place in Pakistan. But What does it mean to the young people, those who turning 18 or 16 and 18 and 20 and 24 or 23? What should that mean to them? Like, what affinity or what identity or what future are they supposed to have with Pakistan? You're sitting in media. Your audience is not people like me. Your audience should be, that's where you're in a competition with others for eyeballs or whatever are young people. That's why you're on social media, because more and more people look at social media for news or analysis, etc. So what would you tell young people? What Pakistan to believe in? What reform to believe in? Or that there's a change around the corner because you can see it crystallizing? What's your message to them?
So I think the young people think very differently, from what my understanding is. And they're pretty fed up with the way that this country has been run. They're very open in terms of blaming the previous generations, and for good reason. They will only have a stake in the system if the system works for them. It should have worked for the previous generation, it didn't. And for the generation before that, it didn't. How long can Pakistan just continue to muddle through? I think we are past that stage. For that to happen, some fundamental changes have to happen, which connect directly to the lives of people. It can't be just, big decisions made in corridors and then they're doled out as, revolutionary items done in and they're confined to just speeches and rhetoric.
But that did happen. I mean, we can argue about the politics of it. How did it happen? But one political party did catch the imagination of young people, and that continues to be the ideal or sharing the vibe
Correct.
of the young people.
Correct.
And that political party is not allowed to be back in power. So
correct.
What
but,
then?
But again, the fact is that political party did catch the imagination of a lot of young people and also a lot of people in uniform.
And continues to retain that.
A lot of people in uniform.
Yeah.
So PTI came into power with the help of people and with the help of establishment. Let's not forget that.
And ran the government with the help of that as
and
well.
once they were in power for 3.5 years, they can be accused of a lot of things, but they cannot be accused of governing well. That must be known. So fundamental, what we are talking about in terms of the young people.
That's something that you and I can talk about. It's not something that it really doesn't affect the young people, because they continue to be enamored by and be in love with the same leader, the same party, the same narrative.
I think what we're talking about is young people connecting their future to the future of Pakistan.
Yeah.
And I think that connection goes beyond a single political party or two parties. That, I think, connects deeply to their role in the society. And that directly links to how their potential can be realized, how this system can work for them, how it can make their lives better, how they can have a prosperous and happy future in this country. And that can only happen if Pakistan is able to embrace radical change for the better. That has not happened under PTI. It has not happened under PMLN. It has not
it's not happening
under
now.
People's Party or under the military governments. Now, so the only question, as far as I'm concerned, is in the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, are we on the path where kids who are teenagers today can actually look back after 10 years and say, wow, we lived through this massive change in Pakistan. That change will not happen overnight. You can see the contours of that change much before. Are we seeing those contours? No, we're not. We're not seeing that. Are we seeing Pakistan stabilizing a little bit? Of course we are. The hope is that perhaps, as flawed as this system is, and we can all talk about, the elections and the mandate and all of that, but the fact is that despite all of this, if in the next 10 years, Pakistan looks like a different country for people who live here, especially young people.
You mean economically or any other way?
In every way. not just economically, in the environment they live in the culture they live in the way that the state responds to their needs, in the security that they feel living here, their rights, etc., etc. Everything that a young people would want when he or she looks at the rest of the world and is able to compare. That's something that this generation has, which we didn't, or our parents didn't. But now instant comparison, instant exposure
is available,
is available, and therefore Pakistan and Pakistanis who are in positions of making decisions now have to compete with the rising expectations of the people. And as long as the gap between what the state can deliver and what the people expect from it continues to grow, we are in a serious problem.
If you were advising the people in power today and you were telling them to, take care of the sense and sensibilities of this youth before even this generation that's growing up kind of, becomes very cynical about Pakistan, what would you say which one thing that would move the needle for young people?
I think the framing of what Pakistan should be is missing. I think what we see, what PTI has done fantastically well, and one of the reasons why so many young people flocked to PTI was that it tried to break away from the existing system as it was exemplified by the old parties. It drew a sharp contrast to them and said this is going to be a completely new Naya Pakistan, etc., etc. That was a nice framing, but it worked. It worked because the people were so fed up.
Yeah, how can the current plot do it?
They are still fed up.
Yeah.
The problem with PTI is the advantage was that they had a new framing, a new vision. The problem was that it was too vague. So now...
Well, that's how populists work.
Exactly. So now if you have to move forward, my only advice to whoever is making decisions is to first tell the people what kind of Pakistan they are looking for. Tell them, okay, in the next 10 years, this is how we want Pakistan to be. This is our aim. Or in the next 5 years. Give them something to visualize. And then tell them, okay, this is how this country is going to be if we get our way, and this is how we plan to get there. You have to make people visualize and dream. You can't tell them, okay, I've made 3 bridges and 4 roads, and hence your future is bright. No, you have to... What PTI did was it made people dream. But the dream remained very vague. Now people need to believe in Pakistan.
Now even brick and mortar isn't really giving them
brick
the
and
dream
mortar
and narrative.
Is not the stuff that dreams are made of. I think it's something bigger. It's something more, something that I can connect to, something that kids can look and say, if Pakistan is going to be like that, I'm going to be here for that. And then, but also tell them, okay, this is how we're going to get it done. For this to happen, you need 2 things. First, you need that vision.
And second, better framing.
Yeah, and second, you need a plan.
Better narrative, better framing.
Absolutely. I don't see that happening.
Well, thank you very much, Fahd. This was really useful. As usual, I think we get into more of our conversation of what's going on and how we sort of look at it. But I hope this is of value to my audience. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure
I really appreciate it. And to my audience, please do leave feedback and let me know who I should talk to next. Thank you.